Alright guys, just bear with me while I get everything set up because this is going to be a fairly long live, about an hour and 45 minutes, 2 hours total. And I want to make sure I'm able to see your comments, so I'm going to put the live video on my iPad so that I can do everything and see if you have any questions as I go. So just bear with me while I try to find what I'm looking for. Ah, here it is. Okay. All right. There we go. Okay, I should see your comments as they come in. If you have any, ignore, my errors. So first things first, my name is Erica. I'm the creator of Creative Chaos by Erica. And today's how-to video is going to be how to make 3D cactuses out of stained glass. This is a step-by-step. So I'll be starting with a blank slate of glass, and I'll go into how to cut it, how to do your patterns, all that fun stuff. So this is going to be pretty in-depth. If you're super new, you may want to watch the whole thing. If you don't, I will be posting the final live video on my YouTube, which I have a post about that will have the video so you can skip into sections, but that will be after this live is when I'm going to post it, in case we have people that missed it. I do want to mention that I have dogs. The ones you hear are Apollo and Artemis. They are young and puppies, so I have very loud studio mates. So apologies in advance for them. But we're going to go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to go over is, obviously you want to have your safety protection. I have my glasses here, and then I don't use gloves for this part just because I have really bad dexterity with them, but that is kind of a preference of yours. The first thing that we're going to do is identify which side of the glass has the texture and which side doesn't. So you can get just plain, no textured glass. This is an example of that, where this glass is just flat on both sides. Okay, in this case you wouldn't need to identify which side is the flat side for this specific project. Now I like to use textured glass because I think it gives it a little bit more of a realistic, lifelike looking feel to it. So for this example, this sheet of glass is this side is the textured side, and this side is the flat side. This side, the flat side, is the one that you want to trace your patterns onto and cut from. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and lay this down. Now I use and make all of my patterns, at least right now, are handmade. And I just use watercolor paper or very thick cardstock paper for my patterns. So I've already cut out my patterns for these cactuses. So this is my small pattern. I do have a ruler, and I wanted to give you the measurements of it. Let's see. So at the widest point, it's about 4¼ centimeters, and at the tallest point, it's about, let's see, 5¾ centimeters. So that is kind of what I go with. You have 2 flat sides, and you want to keep these flat, and then you have the curved rounded side. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off by cutting out our patterns, and we'll tracing them and then cutting them out. So what I like to do is, for these small cactuses, you need 6 body pieces, at least for the ones that I do. So you're going to line up the edges to your glass. This is just the easiest way to start. And you're just going to take a regular Sharpie and trace along that piece. Now I like to go, let's see, I want to give you accurate measurements. Maybe about 1 centimeter away from each one. You can kind of eyeball it. You want enough to where this isn't going to be super skinny. If the soup is super skinny, you can break it off, and it's going to be a lot more work when you're grinding it. Now you can use these smaller pieces of glass for little leaves or petals for other projects, so just kind of keep that in mind. So then I'm going to continue to trace, continue to trace these body pieces out. Again, just leaving about 1 centimeter, 1.5 centimeters spacing. Making sure that my edges are flush with the edges and they're not hanging off. Okay, so. And then bear with me when it comes to the recording part of this. I'm super new. And I'm trying to make sure that you guys get what you can. All right, that one, and we're probably gonna have to do another row, which is fine. It's always good to have extra pieces. And this, I can show you how I cut out these bodies. Okay, so like I said, we need 5 pieces. This one looks a little lopsided. So what I'm gonna do is just take a rag and wipe this off. Okay. And put it back on so that I know it's not super off. Okay. So now you're going to take your ruler and you're going to line it up pretty close to the tops of these cactuses. If you want to, you can leave a little bit of space. This allows for cleaner breaks later on, but you waste more glass that way. So it is kind of up to you in how you want to utilize your glass. I would say it would be easier for beginners to leave space here at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what that would look like. I have more sheets of glass for these later, so we'll just do that. So this is about 1 centimeter as well in terms of distance away from the top of the other pieces. So I'm going to do a straight line. Okay. And now the fun part, the cutting. So now that you have the straight line, you can use one of 2 different cutting tools. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot more out there. These are the ones that I have currently. So I have a stylus and I have a pistol grip one. Now this one comes with a reservoir for cutting oil in it. This one you have to, I believe there's also a reservoir for cutting oil if you unscrew it and put some in here. However, I don't put oil in this cutting tool. I do for my pistol grip. Now I use both of these simultaneously and you'll see me do that throughout this video. I'm going to start with the pistol grip cutting tool and I'm just going to cut a straight line from the bottom of this piece to the top. So. Now, as a beginner, don't feel like you have to go super fast. I'm still a beginner, so I'm talking to those like me out there. The next thing that you can do is either use the butt end of the stylus tool to open up the crack, or you can use a pair of glass cutting pliers and do it that way. Now, when it comes to these pliers, you want to ensure that the bottom part here that is kind of curved like my finger is right this, you want to ensure that this piece is on the bottom, okay? The one that is curved, you know, up this way, it's kind of making like a sad face. You want to ensure that it's kind of like this. The easiest way for me is to mark the top with a Sharpie. So what you're going to do is you're going to pick up your piece, you're going to take your pliers, you're going to line up that line with the line that you cut, and then gently apply pressure. When you do this, if you do it for the first time, it might be a little scary, and that's okay, but that's going to cut out that piece. So what you're going to do is you're going to set this piece aside, and we're going to come back to it later, and we're going to trace out the rest of our pieces. So like I said, for this small cactus body, we need 6 pieces. So I'm just going to cut out another line just to do it, and so that I have them for later. I do these a lot. So more cactus pieces can never hurt. Once you do this a couple of times, it becomes second nature. Okay. Again, you're just going to take about 1 centimeter above those cactuses, just a good bit. Like that. Cut that line out. Okay. And then using your cutting tool, just going along that Sharpie line. Using your pliers, lining up that line, and then applying pressure. Okay, so I'm gonna set this piece aside. I'll use this later for more cactus bodies. And now we're gonna focus on cutting out each individual body section. So the first thing that I start by doing is cutting out each individual body by the straight line. It's just going to be a little bit simpler. You're not going to have to curve it out and worry breaking pieces off in diagonals. So that's what we're going to do first. So just like you did with your larger section, you're just going to cut along the straight lines that you marked for the cactuses. I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to do the other ones. Okay. I'm going to set this aside for now, and then I'm going to use my pliers again, and I'm just going to line my line up with those lines and gently apply pressure. Now, if you see closely when I'm cutting these lines that there are small shards of glass that are coming off, this is why it's very, very, very important to wear your glasses. I know everybody says it a million times. They're not lying to you. They're telling the truth. Please wear your protective equipment. Okay? All right. So we got 1 set of bodies. We need 1 more, right? Because we're doing 6. So I'm going to cut these ones also, right? We cut them, I'm just going to break them too. Add them to our pile. Perfect. So I'm going to start the curve cut on these larger ones first, just to kind of show you what these look like. For these cuts, I'm going to be using the stylus cutting wheel instead of the pistol grip. Now, this is just because it's a personal preference. I also think that this gives a little bit more of a cleaner cut. What I am going to do, though, is get a small bit of cutting oil for this pen. So I'm just going to get a piece of paper. I'm going to put a little bit cutting oil on it. There's already some on the side of my, there you go. Just put a little bit on this piece of paper. to the side. And then you can just take your stylus, roll it in that cutting oil, get a little bit of the excess off, and then set it to the side. All right, so you're gonna take your stylus, you're gonna press, and you're going to go with the curve. Here's the important part. See that I didn't go all the way to the edge of this curve. I only went kind of more straight up. This is so that you don't break off or have it crack where you don't want it to. If you do it straighter like this, you're not going to lose as much glass, and you're also going to have a crisper line when it comes to grinding. You're going to save yourself a lot of time. So this is where I use the butt end of the stylus tool for this part. So you're just going to gently tap along this line and see how it was a clean break from the bottom to the top. If I were to have used the pliers, which I mean sometimes you do get this little bit here, you can use the pliers for that, or you can just tap along this side and then normally give a little bit of pressure and it'll tighten that up. When in doubt though, you can just grind this piece and that's perfectly fine. So I'm gonna set this piece aside because I'm gonna use it for later projects. And then I'm gonna take my stylus and I'm going to go along this curve. Again, I'm not going for this curve all the way. I'm just going straight. And then I'm going to just tap this part out and pop right up. So I'm gonna have to grind this part obviously, and that's fine. And we just have this last little bit. I think that's my favorite part of all of this. Now I have little cups that I like to put my scraps in just so that they're not all over my table. I'm gonna see if I can get this little piece to pop off with my pliers though. Yes, there you go. So sometimes you can grab and then pull, pull down, like you're opening a can. Be careful with this though, because you can break off a bigger piece than you want to. So I'm going to take this body piece, I'm just going to place it over to the side, and now we're going to work on these smaller ones. So instead of having this really large piece on the edge of our body piece, we have this smaller piece. So this is what that looks like when you cut that. Now again, we're not following the curve all the way. You want to stop right where it starts to curve drastically. Okay. Okay. And see how you get a nice clean curve and cut with that. Again, we're just gonna go around this curve. This one doesn't want to pop off. There you go. Sometimes it's being really stubborn by hitting it from the bottom. You hit it from the bottom a couple of times and then just hit it from the top and it should be fine. Okay. And we're just going to keep doing this with our body pieces. I'm going to go a little bit faster with this portion just because I'm used to it. Take your time when you're doing your own. Sometimes you get lucky and they come off in one piece. Let's see. Okay. That's 4. Got Saves you a lot of work when it comes to grinding later on. All right, last piece. I'll cut out those other pieces later on. Actually, I'll show you one where you can use the pliers to do this part, and I'll show you kind of what the outcome of that looks like, just to give you kind of an idea. Again, please wear your safety glasses. Okay. Now, say for instance, I wanted to use my pistol grip for the curves of these. This is what that would look like. Now, I agree that it is a little bit easier to handle. Those with tender fingers and things like that may prefer the pistol grip. So that was just making the cut with the pistol grip and then using the brass part of it. You do get a nice good cut. You will have to probably use something of this nature. Now if I'm going to do the same thing with this part. That's good. And then around the around the final curve here. It was harder from the back, but it worked good still. Okay, we're going to set that aside. So that was using the pistol grip and the back of this. If for some reason you don't have this at all, we're going to set this aside. I'm going to show you what it looks like with the pistol grip and the pliers instead. Okay, so we're making the same kind of cuts, just using a different cutting tool. And then I'm going to line up my pliers. You see how it breaks here? That's kind of what, I mean, it doesn't hurt your piece any. It's kind of what we want to avoid, right? Now, you can still get a pretty good clean cut, but you have the risk of breaking your piece a little bit more. So again, I'm just going to do this straight cut at the top. That was fine. Good. Good. Trial and error, find out what works best for you. I prefer using the stylus to make the cuts and the ball of the stylus to make the breaks for these pieces. And that also is extremely important when it comes to the petals, which is what we're going to do next. So I'm going to set these other two aside. We don't need these. They're going to go with this as well. I'm going to make sure I have 6. I do. These are what I'm going to use for today's cactus. So I'm going to use a, I'm trying to think what color I want my petals to be. Let's do something that's easy to see. I'm going to use this sea glass blue. I really like this color, and I think that it'll look nice for some petals. Of course, you can use any color you want. Even the body of your cactus doesn't have to be green. So definitely feel free to get creative with it and make your own chaos. All right. So this is a little different in that both sides are flat. They are not textured. So it doesn't matter which side of the glass I make my cuts on. Just like my cactus body, which I want to make sure I put the form back in my little dish here so I don't lose it. I have cut a petal body out of that watercolor paper, that cardstock also. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace out the petals for this as well, keeping space between both sides. This is going to give you cleaner cuts on your petals, and less work when it comes to grinding later on. For these small cactuses, I have about 5 petals per cactus. I also have about 3 to 4 smaller petals when it comes to the difference in sizes. So I'm going to trace these out. I know it's kind of hard to see. I'm just going to go down the line. I'm going to give myself a couple of extras just in case one breaks not the way that I want it to. We'll probably do doubles so I don't have to do more petals later. Alright, then I'm going to flip my glass around. I'm going to flip my form around. And I'm going to hold it in the same place. Just go back down the line and finish my petals. Now, don't worry about the Sharpie on them. We're going to clean them up after. This is just a guide for you to make sure that you're making those cuts correctly. And the nice thing is too, this is just a guide. It's not a requirement to cut them like this. And you can make this shape whatever works best for you. Definitely trial and error it, test it out, see what works best when it comes to the cutting aspect of things. All right, so I'm going to set this aside into some place that I can easily find it. And then I'm going to get my ruler again, so having that handy is important. I'm going to do, this time I'm not going to leave space in between the form and the line because I'll have plenty of space when I'm going through. So I'm going to take this Sharpie, I'm just going to do the line real quick. First things first, I'm going to take that cutting tool that you have and cut down this straight line. Applying even pressure as you go. Okay, I'm going to use my pliers, put it over the straight line, and apply pressure. I'm going to take this piece, set it aside. I'm going to use this later for some more petals. And then I have all my petals. This is where I utilize the stylus again. So we're going to go down and we're going to do the curve of each petal. Actually, you know what? I'm going to cut in the center of this first, just so that I don't have to pick up and tap such a large piece. Okay, so you see how when I do that, I get a clean cut on either side. There's not going to be a lot for me to grind for these kind of pieces. Because they're so small, it's very easy to get your fingers kind of caught if you don't wear gloves and things in the grinder, and you don't want that to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go down the right side of each petal first. And then I'm going to take the ball end, I'm going to hold, and then, okay, there's one. See how I have a little bit of a piece here. You can use another pair of pliers. I can't remember the name for them. I think they're like Grosvenor pliers. Gosh, English today. That might be a little bit easier. So then we're going to go down the left side, or what was the left side of each petal. Once you do that, you're going to hold the petal, thumb on top, index finger on bottom, hold it pretty tightly, and then use your butt end of the stylus to get that off there. Now you want to be careful because you don't want to cut yourself with this glass. So when you hold it, make sure it's not pressing into your skin here. You want it sitting kind of on top, right, like kind of like this, right? And then you hold. Okay. Some like to be more stubborn than others. I do tricks on the weekends. Just kidding. All right. Ooh, that one was fun. All right. So that's 5. We'll do this last one. And then I'm gonna just use my pliers to break off. Maybe? There we go. Oh, I thought so. Nope. So this one I'll have to grind, but I'll put that aside later with these other ones. Now this is important that you have these kind of bigger pieces in between your petals, because these are what's going to give you your mini petals, the ones that you're going to use in your center. So again, you're just going to use your stylus tool and you're going to create small petals. Now you can draw these out with your Sharpie first, if that makes it easier. For me, I'm just going to use the stylus tool, but I'll illustrate what that looks like in a second. I'm going to use the pliers for this piece. It's a little sharp. Let's just break this off. There we go. All right. So now these smaller pieces are going to require grinding to make them petal shaped. So here's one. We're going to go and do a couple more. So I'm going to take this piece, I'm going to cut along this side and along this side right here. I'm going to use the pliers for these ones just because of how little they are. That the hitting it, I'm just going to hit myself if I do that. So here's another little one. I'm going to make a couple of these just so that I have them for this other set too. Let's do cut along this way and cut along this way. Apologize for the weed whacker outside. It's beautiful here in Northern Virginia and people are taking advantage of it when it comes to mowing their lawns because it's not sweltering hot. So. don't have to be uniform. That's the thing about the petals, is that you can make them with that pattern, or you can just freehand draw them. Whatever, you know, works best for you. Well, hi Apollo. What are you doing? Okay, so these 5 are what I'm going to use for today's cactus. I'm going to set these guys aside to use for a later cactus. So now you have your cactus bodies, the one that we cut out earlier, all 6. We do have some extras just in case, but you kind of reached the point where you're not going to have any crazy issues arise in terms of things breaking, unless you accidentally drop them on the floor or something like that. You also have 10 petals. You have 5 large ones and 5 small ones, 5 miniatures. Okay, so the next part of this is the grinding aspect. So what I'm going to do is take my pieces and we're going to move over to my grinding station and put these down. Oop. Okay. I'm going to bring the laptop, or the iPad with me, just so I can keep track. If anybody has any questions throughout this, please ask. If you don't want to ask in here, or you can't think of any right now, you can ask via YouTube later. I'm going to take this off for now, just because it's kind of hindering the view for this video. Actually, you know what? This has a light in it. Forgot about that. I'm going to put it back. Okay. All right. We're instead going to move you over a bit. That looks better. Okay. Now this portion is going to be a little loud. What I'm going to do is, this is a warning beforehand, you can turn the volume off when the grinder is on. I will not be talking and giving commentary. If I turn the grinder off, you'll see this start moving. Obviously, it means I have a piece of advice or something to say about the piece. So I'm going to move these little guys off to the side. One thing to start beforehand, I do wear gloves for the grinding process, and I do also put my pieces in a small bowl afterwards that I'll use to help wash off the piece. So there's that. So I'm going to put my gloves on and we're going to get to it. Now before I turn the grinder on, the thing that I'm looking to do is keep these flat sides flat and keep this rounded side smooth and rounded, right? So I'm not really going to grind these flat sides so much as I am going to ground these rounded sides. Okay, So you can see how for this grinding, I ground all of sides, even the flat ones, with slightly rounding these corners right here on all three of those edges. You want to try to keep this as flat and as close to how you cut it as possible, and this is going to help aligning the pieces afterwards. So I'm going to take this, put it to the side, and I'm going to do the rest of the pieces. Okay, so we're done all of the cactus body pieces. So we have those 6. Those are done. I'm going to set those in a bowl. The next thing that we're going to do are the petal pieces. Now you can see with the petal pieces that they have slight ridges on them from the cutting portion. That's what we're looking to cut down, and that's why it's extremely important to wear your gloves. Now we're not going to make them super rounded. We still want to kind of keep a little bit of that point, but you'll see what that looks like after they're all done grinding. Okay, now we're gonna go into the very small piece part. That it's a little bit more tedious because they're the really small pieces, and the gloves, at least for me, make it a little bit harder dexterity wise. But we're gonna go into that and just round out these corners and round out the tops. All right, so that is all of our pieces. They are grinded and done. So now what we're gonna do is we're just going to clean off our pieces with straight water. So what I like to do is just get a bowl, and I also have a spray bottle full of water and a couple of paper towels. One of your paper towels is going to be used to just wipe off the excess water. The other one you can just put to the side. And you're just looking to get all of the sand off of these pieces. And once you get a little bit of water in the bowl, it'll help wash them off too. Now if you look at your pieces after you're done grinding them, and there are a lot of pieces or a lot of spaces where this is not a dulled edge and it's super shiny, like a little spot like right here. If majority of your edge is like that, it's gonna make it harder for, or at least in my experience, it's made it harder for the copper foil to stick to the piece. So you wanna make sure that you, if you see that, that you go back and grind that piece again. Or you're gonna run into issues a little bit later on. Okay, we're just making sure we get all that sand off there. Couple more to go, at least with the body pieces, and then we'll do the petals too. So just give them a good wash. You don't need any kind of special soap or anything like that. Just use water. and they can get slippery. So also just be careful when you're cleaning to watch for any sharp edges, anything like that. Also look for, look for any pieces that have any Sharpie leftover residue on them, and then just wipe that off using your paper towel and some elbow grease. Alright, once you're done that, you're gonna see specifically on the petals, more of that Sharpie residue. So I'm just gonna clean the sand off of these guys, and then I'll show you how to clean the Sharpie off of it. I'm gonna set these aside. So you can see on this piece that there's still that line of Sharpie there. I'm gonna just take my paper towel and go from the inside out, pressing and then wiping, and that helps get that, that Sharpie residue off. There you go. So now it's all done. We're gonna do the same thing with the other guys. Press in and out. We're going to do the same thing with our little mini pieces too. I'll clean them off. Dry them off a little bit. Inside. Get all this Sharpie off. Last piece. Awesome. So once you have all of your pieces grinded and cleaned off, you're going to just take one more paper towel and just do one final kind of drying, ensuring that all that Sharpie is off there, and that your pieces are clean and don't have a lot of sand on them. If it does have some really stubborn Sharpie, you just want to make sure that you get a wet paper towel to get that off. Perfect. Alright, so those are our body pieces, all done, grinded, and ready to go. And then we have our petals. These guys are a little harder to individually dry just because they're so little. They dry fast. Okay, so we have our 5 big petals, 5 little petals, and our 6 cactus body pieces. The next thing that we're gonna do is move on to copper foiling. So I'm going to move over to the spot where I foil and bring you guys along with me. This is Artemis. Say hi, guys. resident critic. Okay, I'm gonna move the iPad so I can see you guys if you have any questions. Okay. And then we're going to go into the foiling aspect of things. So I'm going to move this just a bit. Okay. So the foil that I am going to be using is the Studio Pro foil, the 732 inch size. So just for reference, that's what that looks like. Okay. Now this is copper backed. You can get black back foil if you're super new and don't know. That can work better for certain glass colors. For these smaller pieces, when it comes to your petals, sometimes that works better. It kind of depends on the color too. So see what works best for you. Currently my local glass shop is out, so I have some that I just got from Hobby Lobby. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the foiling of our cactus bodies. It's just a little bit easier to start. I'm going to actually move you guys to the side so you can see a little bit better how I do this. So what I'm going to do is start with just a little bit of tape. We're going to get a small piece, lay it out on the table. Okay. I'm trying to think which side would be better. Let's try from this side. I'm gonna make sure you guys can see the best. Let's try this side. Okay, so you're gonna take your piece and you're going to start by on the bottom side of the piece. You're going to place it in the center of the copper foil and kind of wiggle it back and forth so that it grabs it. Then you're going to pick it up and you're going to crimp the sides with your thumb. Okay. This is going to ensure that the copper foil sticks to your cactus body while you wrap it around the rest. So then you're going to get a little bit more tape. You're going to take your cactus and you're just going to lay it down in the center and wiggle again. Okay. This time we're not going to crimp it as we go, and we're going to take and continue to just roll it down the center of the tape. Okay. Now what I like to do when it comes to the foil aspect of things is I like to overlap the bottom part. So we're just going to lay it flat right on that portion. Now one thing I did forget to grab was my scissors. So I'm going to grab those. Along with the rest of my kit. Okay. So I have foil cutting scissors. You can use these, or you can just use regular scissors. It's literally your preference. You're gonna just cut it at the bottom of that tape there so you don't waste any more foil than you need to. And then we're going to crimp the sides of the cactus body. So starting at the longer flat side is where I normally like to crimp them. So you just go down the cactus body and then do the curve. And then finally the bottom. Okay, and now that we've done this one piece, we're gonna go ahead and set it aside and do the rest. So again, the steps for that are, we're gonna take some foil, pull it out, lay a bit flat on the table, take your cactus body using the base first, that flat base first, go about 3/4 of the base lay it flat in the center of that foil, wiggle, and then crimp. Okay. And then I'm gonna get some more foil, unwrap that, take our cactus and lay it down flat in the center of that foil, wiggle, and then you can crimp or you don't have to, it's up to you. And then you're going to just take the cactus panel and roll it along the center of this foil. Grab some more and lay it down flat. If for some reason you identify that you haven't put it in the center of the foil, you can lift up again and then lay it down in the center. Wiggle back and forth, use your scissors, cut, and then again, starting at that long portion, crimp down, around, you're applying even pressure on both sides, and then base. Okay, I'm gonna set it aside, and then we're gonna do the rest. Every once in a while, cut that tape off, or that kind of looks like a cardboard tape layer. Cut that off there so that it doesn't get in your way. Again, it's personal preference if you want to crimp the side before you go around. Whatever works better for you. I find myself going back and forth often. Yes, I'm using 7/32 inch. It is copper backed. It is the Studio Pro tape. So the question was, what size tape are you using? That is the 7/32. 7/32. I don't know how you would, because normally you do like 3/16. Not good with that. So yeah, so again, just starting at the bottom, doing about 3/4 of the way, crimping, and then slide the bottom, wiggle. You can crimp here as well. And then rolling. Okay, give it another little wiggle. Cut. Crimp. Perfect. So now we have all of our cactus bodies done. What we're going to do next is our flower petals. Same kind of concept when it comes to the foiling aspect of things. All right. So again, just kind of cutting off that cardboard part that we don't need anymore, or the the foil tape backing. So for this part, you're going to again just use a little bit of the flower itself, maybe about 1/3 of the petal's larger length, and you're going to crimp it just like we did with our cactus body. And then you're going to get some more foil, and you're going to just press, make sure it's in the center, and roll it. Same thing, this, and overlap that edge that you already made. Now here's where it gets a little bit different. Easiest way to do this with the bigger pieces is to hold it by one edge like this, and then crimp this bottom part up to about halfway. Same thing for the other side. And then hold it from the bottom. Now you want to be careful, because if you look at the sides here, you get like a little T out jet of copper foil. Now this can be very pointy and it can hurt, and I speak from experience of just doing this and getting poked with the copper foil, which is quite painful. So we're going to crimp all of the sides. Once you get those little T's on both sides, so you're going to get, I'm going to hold it up and see, hope that it focuses. Let's see. You can kind of get the gist. It looks like little horns on either side, so the little horns. What you're going to do is you're going to take the petal, you're going to hold it horizontal. You're going to hold it at a 45-degree angle where that little horn is, and you're going to press it in and down. Same thing on this side. Press in, down. 45-degree angle, make it flat. 45, flat again. Now that takes those horns and presses them into the petal itself, so you don't have those out points anymore, and it's not uneven when it comes to your foiling, and that's your solder is even once you apply it later. So you're going to do that again with one of the bigger petals, and then I'll go through all the smaller ones again also. So again, just about 1/3 of the way, get it to grab and then crimp. Hold from one corner, crimp about halfway. Same thing for the other side. And sometimes you can slip, and that's okay. Main thing is just making sure that those are good. Now again, when you get those little foil T's at the top, hold it 45-degree angle, press down. Press in, down. And down. Have those all folded up nice. Now when it comes to the smaller ones, These guys are a little bit more tricky. And when it comes to using 7 32-inch, you're gonna get a lot of foil overlap in such a small petal. So just like last time though, you're gonna do about 1/3 of the way of the petal. Roll it just like you did with the previous one and the bigger petals itself. Again, overlapping that petal, cutting that foil. This is where it can get a little trickier. So you're gonna kind of crimp both sides just so that you have it a little bit flat. These are where the T's can hurt you. And then just kind of press in on the sides. Get one side flat, and that's kind of your ticket there. These, you can get really prominent little T's, little foil T's here. And that's where you just want to press them down again. Same concept as we did with the bigger petals. Now, you don't have to, this foil doesn't have to be absolutely flat, right? That's what the smoothing out process is for. So just kind of ignore that. What I like to do is just go through, foil all my pieces, and straighten them out, flatten them as a group. Artemis, sit, please. Shh. Sit, please. See, I told you I have noisy studio mates. Just trying to be protective. Just a good girl. I know. Thank you. No. Artemis. You talking to them too? What advice you give? Have fun? That's the advice? Artemis says, whatever you do, have fun. Yes, she is very much the one that is attached to myself. My husband, who is currently deployed and not using his side of the garage, which is why I have such a large studio, Apollo is his companion, and he is currently lounging in our basement, while Artemis is attached to my hip here in the studio. She has no idea what's going on. She just wants to be a part of it. Okay, 2 more and then we are done. Alrighty, let's see here. Hold on 1 second, I'm gonna plug this light back in so you can see everything, because I'm currently in my garage, which is very low light. It lasted longer than I thought it would though. There we go. Okay, back, sorry. I dropped my computer, or I dropped my camera. It went nuts. We're back. We should be fine. Sorry if you're listening with headphones. That probably was terrible for you. One last petal. And we should be good to go. Diane said, you make foiling look so easy. It's the hardest thing for me. I hate foiling. It is the thing I hate the most in this whole entire process. I think my favorite part is the cutting of the glass, which is the destruction part, which I like. My least favorite is the foiling. I used to hate grinding until I got the grinder too, and now I could kind of care less about grinding. It has made it much easier and more enjoyable, but I will tell you that foiling is still the bane of my existence. Alrighty, now that I'm done foiling, I'm just going to take the excess paper here and throw it away. I'm going to wrap the excess of this foil up and stick it so that it doesn't unravel itself and make a mess, which I need to get better at. And then I'm going to flatten my pieces. So I have a little flattening rib that I just got at Hobby Lobby. You can get the curved ones too. I just use this flat one here. So many, all the fun stuff. So I'm going to start with the cactus pieces and I'll go over how I do those. So the first thing is, now these are textured, right? So the one side is that textured glass, the one side is that flat glass. You're going to have a easier time flattening and making sure everything is good to go on this flat side than you are on the textured side. So I start on the flat side first, and then I go around. So what you're gonna do is just hold your rib at a 45-degree angle, and you're just going to gently go along that seam here. Don't press and like hold, like don't pull. You don't need to do it very aggressively, right? Same thing along these edges here. In a minute, I'll show you what happens if you rip the tape, how to fix it. I'm gonna attempt not to do it on purpose, or on accident, only on purpose. Now for this side, because it's textured, you wanna take a little bit more time in making sure that it's pressing down into those little grooves, right? So pressing down into those grooves as you go along, even on the sides here. Okay. Make sure you get a nice good stick with this tape, this foil. Okay. Now what I'm also going to do is, once you have flattened your piece, you're going to go around and you're going to look for any overlap of your tape. So for example, this one here has a teeny tiny bit of overlap. It's like very, very hard to see. Right here, that I'm going to cut. So I'm just going to take an X-Acto knife. You want to ensure the blade is sharp, and they do come with several blades, so just kind of, you know your blade best. And I'm just going to cut that little piece off and put it to the side or throw it away, because they can be very sharp and I don't want to cut myself. I'm going to look at the other side. I don't see any abnormalities or anything like that. So this one is done, and I'm going to set it to the side. Now, in the case where you rip foil on accident, I'm going to show you what that looks like. Say for instance, I'm going through, remember this is the flat side, I'm doing the flat side first, and I go through and I press really, really hard, and I rip, maybe it'll do better on this side, and I rip the foil, right? So I've pressed way, way too hard, and now my foil is ripped here. If I left it this way, that's where your solder is going to stick. So you don't want that to happen. You want to fix this before you continue, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my X-Acto knife. I'm going to cut a little bit below where I ripped it, a little bit above. And I'm going to do that all the way around on either side, okay? So a little bit above it, cutting. And then I'm going to just take and peel off the foil where I made that rip. Okay. Same here. Make this doctored bit. Okay. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring back out the foil for this. So I'm just going to get a little bit of foil. That's about the size. You want to kind of measure how big this is. You want to overlap a little bit. Not a lot, just a little bit. Okay, we're just doing a suture basically. I'm going to cut that for my foil. Set this aside again. I'm going to lay it flat on the table, just like I did at the beginning when I was doing this. I'm going to make sure it overlaps a little on the foil that already exists, crimp it, okay, and then roll it halfway down. It overlaps a little bit on the other side as well, crimp it, and you fixed it. Now you are most likely going to have to do some trimming when it comes to the tape, but that's okay, because now we don't have a hole where our solder is going to look bad. So again, just holding this at a 45-degree angle, and not with a lot of force, but enough, just a little bit, smoothing out this copper tape and making sure that it adheres nicely to our glass. Okay. Flip it over, and we're doing the textured side, making sure and this is where your rips are normally going to happen if you're using a textured green glass. That we're not pressing too hard to where we're going to get caught on that texture, but that we're getting in those little grooves there, and then it's sticking nicely. We're not getting any of those gaps. Now, if you see here, this is where I have that overlay, right? This is where I made my doctored piece. This is what I'm gonna need to cut. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my X-Acto knife. I'm gonna see where that overlap is. I'm just gonna cut that little piece off and make sure everything is uniform. Look on both sides, we're all good. I'll set that one aside and I'll just continue with the rest. So flat side first, 45, gently press and go around. Sometimes I cut the foil as I go just so that I don't forget to do it later, and that everything looks nice once I start soldering. One thing I have noticed when it comes to the smoothing out of these curved edges on the flat side is that you want to go in little increments. You don't want to go like one full swoop to start. That can definitely lead to the breaking of your foil tape, ripping of it, and you're having to mend it later. So more work for you on the end part, which we're gonna try to avoid. Remember, like I said, you don't want to go in one full swoop. You want to kind of smooth it out and go over it a couple of times, making sure you don't rip that tape, that foil. Last body piece. So that's it for the cactus body pieces. So these are all done. Now we're going to go over the petals. Again, for these, because they are flat glass, it's a little bit easier. We're just going to go over each side, Don't press too hard. Again, just a 45-degree angle. Gently press. I'm not trying to rip that tape. Now for these ones, you're oftentimes going to get more of an overlap. So you can see how there's that tiny bit of overlap right here. That's what I'm going to cut off. I'm going to take that X-Acto knife, have that, cut that off, and set aside. I'm going to do that for all of these petals. Now, I've noticed for myself that I oftentimes rip the tape on petals far more easy than I rip the tape on the cactuses. So just kind of be patient with them. They are little and can be a little bit more tricky. These little petals normally have a lot more overlap than the larger ones. The biggest thing though is just making sure you have a nice grip on it so that you don't hurt yourself with the X-Acto knife. Last one. Just do a little cleanup here. Perfect. Okay. I'm gonna clean up this tape. Now we're going to move on to the solder portion. So with the solder portion, I'm going to just have another piece of like that watercolor paper. You can use a paper towel, kind of whatever makes you comfortable. The other thing that I'm going to use again is a pair of gloves because I don't want to get the flux on my hands. And this also, I'm just using a wet paper towel to clean off these gloves real quick. The other thing I don't want to do is get the solder on my hands. And the gloves help protect from that. So remember, don't want to hurt yourself. No need to do that. Okay, so to start, I'll be using the Ameriway Gel Flux. This is the flux that I use normally. And then what I'm also going to do is just get a little paint tray. You can get these at the dollar store. This is just the easiest way to keep my gel flux in one area. I'm gonna put out just a little container of it, put my flux away, and then I'm gonna get a little paintbrush. This one I'm gonna use to apply the flux to my pieces. So I'm gonna just go ahead, lay my pieces out. We're gonna do all the cactus bodies first, and then all of the petal bodies. Just keeping them in a place. Put my gloves on here. And go ahead and start fluxing my pieces. I'm doing one side first of all of the pieces. I will solder that one side, then I will flip them, and then I will do the sides of them. So. I like to use either a paper towel or a piece of paper when it comes to the flux so that I also don't get it on my table. This makes it a little easier to clean up, especially if you're in a smaller space. Okay. Gone ahead and flux all of them. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in my soldering iron. Now for reference, and I will put this in the description of the video as well, I use the Hakko 601 soldering iron. I love this thing. If you start off with a soldering iron from somewhere like Hobby Lobby or Amazon or something like that, this makes a world of difference. I was having the worst time soldering. I hated it. I didn't think I'd ever be any good at it. And then I switched soldering irons, and it was like a whole new world, literally, like the Disney song, a whole new world. It was so much easier. I had a lot less trouble, and to this day I swear by the soldering iron. The reviews for it are really good as well. Just kind of look up and see what works best for you. The soldering iron is set at 360 degrees Fahrenheit, I believe. Should be 360 degrees Fahrenheit. It heats up pretty quickly. I have a wet sponge for my soldering iron that I'm just going to use to clean it every once in a while. This soldering iron comes pre-wetted when it comes to the tip of it. You can get other tips if you need, but that's just kind of situational awareness. Alright, so the next thing I'm also going to go over is the kind of solder that I use. So I use Ameriway 6040 Sapphire. That is the brand of solder. So I'm just going to go ahead and spool out a little bit of that. And I keep it off to the side of the pieces so that in case I grab too much and it drops, it doesn't drop directly onto the pieces. I'm going to put my gloves back on, and then we're going to start get going. So just grab a little bit, a little dollop of it, and then I'm just going to go down the side here, one side, grab a little bit, and then drag, keeping my soldering gun horizontal. Okay. So go horizontal, go around, grabbing as I go. You don't need a lot of solder when it comes to doing these sides. Because we're going to put the spikes on later and we're going to attach from the center, you just need a little bit, not a lot, so just a little dab. Ooh. again, just keeping your soldering iron horizontal to the piece, the panel itself. And with this, because it's on a piece of paper, you can use the paper and move it if needed. One thing I learned really early on is that for some reason, if you grab a lot of solder, and let's just say you get it on the piece, right? It's going to harden. You can use the tip of your soldering iron to just kind of grab a little bit of it and then knock that solder off into another portion of your soldering tray. Okay, just kind of grab that. The nice thing about this too is that it can be cleaned with a toothbrush. And I'll kind of show you what that looks like. So don't worry, it's not permanent and you didn't mess up all the way. Okay, so now that we have this one side done, I'm going to clean off my soldering iron, put it back in its holder, and then I'm just going to flip these pieces so that I can flux the opposite side and solder them as well. Okay, again, just taking your paintbrush, getting a little bit of that flux on there, going over these sides and those other copper tape lines. Now you don't have to use gel flux. I just find it a little bit easier to use when it comes to these cactuses. When I started out, I started using liquid flux and it was fine. It did make portions of this a little bit harder. So doing things like the little dollops that you'll see down the centers of the cactuses, that was made significantly more difficult using the liquid flux than the gel flux. Okay, so I already did that one. All right, so we're just going to repeat the process. Grabbed a little too much, but that's okay. the next thing what we're gonna do is either side. So for this, you don't really need to flux these sides anymore because they've gotten flux from either side when you were doing it, when you did everything the last time. What we're just gonna do is hold our soldering iron flat against it, horizontal against the panel, and just drag down gently. You're going to get a ball of solder on your soldering iron. You're just going to knock it off and then continue. Okay. Knocking off that excess. We don't need that excess. Thus, that's solder that you can save for later and use on another project. Okay, so this one's done. Okay, same thing. Just run it down the side, make sure that's nice and even. Okay. Knocking off that extra when it builds up on that iron, and wiping off as needed. Last piece. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach these cactus panels together to make the cactus body, and do the rivets down the centers before I foil, or not before I foil, before I solder the cactus petals. Only because if you want to, you can just leave the cactus body as the cactus body. You don't have to do anything additional. We're also going to add the spikes before we add the petals. So this is just kind of in order. Now, the easiest way that I have found to keep these petals together is to create a little stand mold. Now, you don't have to make something as permanent as this. You can use something as simple as like Play-Doh that you find at the dollar store, right? You can grab some, I'll just show you an example. This is a little bit more messy when it comes to using it, but you're just gonna flatten it out into a little pancake. You're gonna take your pieces and you're going to line them up where you want them to be soldered and press them into the Play-Doh, and then holds them together while you solder them, right? So that's a benefit, that's a good positive. The only thing that I don't like is the residue that the Play-Doh leaves on your solder and on the piece itself. But when in doubt, if it's, you know, all you have at the time, it's a good tool to use. What I like to use is what's called, what's it called? Amazing Molding Putty. And then, yeah, Amazing Mold Putty. They have an A side and a B side. What you do is you take these, you mix them together, and you create a different product. So it'll look like this. So you get a little bit of this one, a little bit of this one. Make sure they're equal parts, put them together, and then you just mold them until you create this yellow looking substance. It's fun to play with. You can use this to make molding charms too, or even put it together for things like if you were making non-lead jewelry using the solder. I've seen people use it to make butterfly bodies before, if you're looking to make like a stained glass butterfly. But basically you mold it into the consistency of a Play-Doh, right? Making sure that both pieces are combined. You again just make a little pancake, and then you use the pieces, you put them together. The difference with this is that you need to let the mold cure. So you would hold it here and you would put all the panels in the way that you want them and then step away. This allows for you to keep a permanent mold that you don't have to keep remaking and remaking every time that you make your piece. So the question was, what is this substance called again? This is the Amazing Mold Putty. You can find it at Michael's. It's about $22 for a thing. You don't need a lot to make one mold. I'd say you can use maybe a 1/16 of it to make one cactus mold to start. Now with this, once you mix side A and side B together, it's permanent and it will harden and it will cure. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm actually going to make a quick agave mold so that I don't waste this putty. So one of the cactuses that's actually, I'm going to make a tall cactus mold instead. One of the next pieces in the No Green Thumb, No Problem series is going to be a tall green cactus, a tall skinny one. The pieces are going to look a little different. So you guys are getting a preview. The pieces look like this. They're also going to have spikes and they're flat. So you're just going to put them in here like this, squish them together, flip it to the side. Actually, you want to make sure you don't go all the way down to the bottom of the table when you make these molds, just so that they sit together. So far enough in, squeeze a bit so they stay together. Same thing for the other side. Perfect. This is going to help you so much more later, and it's worth the money. Okay, so I'm going to let that cure. It's good to go. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to solder all of our cactus panels together. So I'm going to put them all in here. Like I said, I already made this mold. It's already cured. It's good to go. Okay, I'm going to put my gloves back on just to make sure I don't burn myself. I'm going to get a little bit of solder and I'm going to go panel by panel. So I'm going to hold these two just together. Even though the mold is holding it together, I'm going to hold them together as well. I'm going to do the next one into a branch of 3. Okay, so now these 3 are connected, these 3 aren't. I'm going to rotate my piece just so that I can see a little bit better. Hold these 2 together, solder them, rotate again, hold together, solder, and then you have the last piece that'll connect to 2. So just place that in a little bit, solder that in, and then one last one. Solder these together. Now one thing I like to do is close this hole at the top with solder as well. So you're just going to get a little bit bigger of a dollop. and put that in the center and let that melt. This is going to give you a nice stable foundation to put your petals on a little bit later. Now what we're going to do is we're going to let that cool just a bit and clean off our iron again. We're going to take our mold out carefully so that we don't break it. Set that aside. And then we have the bottom of our cactus. So now, yeah, an up close of which part? I could definitely show you an up close portion. This is what it looks like once it's done. And then the up close of the mold part once it's in there. Kind of like this. So you'll have all portions in the middle. What I'll do is I'll put the mold upside down. So this is what, yeah, of course. So this is the underside of it. You're going to do the same thing that you did with the top, where you're going to solder all of these little pieces together. So you're just going to grab a little portion of solder. You're going to take it and just make sure that these little parts are connected. If I can get them to. Sometimes they don't like to jump between the two. There we go. And then again, you're just going to get a bigger dollop than you did last time, and you're going to put it over that center part, make it flat and filled in, and then once it dries or cools, it's going to be flat and you have a flatter base. Okay, if you notice a particularly high point in your base, that's probably just because you have a little solder ball there. You're just going to smooth that out to make sure that when the cactus stands, it's not super wobbly. Now here's the fun thing about the cactuses though. You don't need a super flat base because most of the time it's going to be put in a planter like it's a real plant. So if it's put in a planter like a real plant, you don't need that super flat base because you're not going to be able to see it anyway, and it's not really going to matter so much. Okay. There. And then we're going to, oh, this is my other mold. All right, so now that we have the top and the bottom soldered, we're gonna do the inside of the panels. Now this is just easier to do while there's still flux on the piece and before you've done the spikes. So what we're going to do is you're going to still have a little bit of that flux on hand and your paintbrush. You're going to take it and you're going to paint the inside of one of those panels, right? So just inside, paint that with that flux. You're going to take your solder and your soldering iron. You're going to grab a little dollop of solder, and remember to keep it, holding it horizontal to try to keep that ball on the top. And then what you're going to do is you're going to hold it vertically so that the drop kind of goes towards the bottom. You can also gently tap your soldering iron on the edge of your holder to get it to kind of drop down like this. You're going to take that and then place that in the panel portion where you added your flux. It's going to add a little bitty ball. Oop, which side is it? I lost it. There it is, sorry. A little ball of solder on the inside of those panels. And that's what we're going to continue to do down the line. So again, I'm just gonna grab a little ball of it, hold it horizontal first to grab it, vertical to let it drop a bit, and then just add that into the center, and it's gonna drop down. Now this one, there's a gap inside, so I'm going to put another ball of solder inside where that gap is. Okay. So it looks something like that. And you're going to continue to do this technique all the way down. If it will drop off. There we go. Again, let me clean off my soldering iron. Grab some more. There we go. If for some reason you find that the balls of solder are not falling off your soldering iron as they should, just clean off your soldering iron and then grab a little bit more solder than you think you need, and allow that to just drop down in the center there. So. Now, one thing is important when you're doing these soldering balls is that you hold it pretty horizontal when you're placing it so that the balls don't travel down the piece as much. So I'll show you an example of what that'll look like if you do that. Okay. So what that would look like is I'm going to, so this panel is finished, and that is what the inside of it looks like. Okay, so we're going to do the next panel. So we're just going to switch over. We're going to flux the inside of this. Now it's okay if there's a gap. You're going to put that flux in there, and those balls are going to fill that gap, so that's okay. You're going to take your soldering iron, clean it off. Grab a little ball of it. Now this is what happens if you take that ball and you hold it vertically, right? You're going to take it and you see how it travels down. That's what we're going to try to avoid, right? So again, you take that ball and if you're holding the cactus horizontally, you're going to get that ball and it's going to travel down. Now sometimes this isn't a bad thing. They can stack on top of each other. However, if this one isn't cooled, they're going to travel all the way down and drip and then congeal together, and it's just not going to look very good. So what you're going to do is you're going to just hold it horizontally, or sorry, if you hold it vertically, it's going to look like that. If you hold it horizontally, it's a little easier to control. And then you're just going to drop the bead where you want to place it and hold it there until it cools. So you're going to do it again. There you go. Trying to hold it in a way where you guys can, that's the one that's done, that's the one we're doing, where you guys can see them. I'm gonna put this one and make it together. There we go. I always imagine when I'm doing this that I'm welding. That's what it reminds me of. You're going to go through, just do these solder balls as you go down. Now say for instance, I do these solders, I don't like them. They're too congealed or they don't look the way that I want them to. All you're going to do is take your soldering iron and you're just going to hold them until they melt. They're going to drop down onto your piece of paper towel or your piece of paper, and then you can pick up that solder afterward and that'll be good to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start over on this one because I didn't like those solder balls. We're going to start over. If you're referring to watching the entire build of the cactus from the beginning, the video will be on YouTube here in the next couple of days. So you're going to take that solder ball, you're going to take it and put it right where you want it, let it dry. Again, just grab a little bit. And then place it right back in that beginning. Sometimes you may need to add more flux, which is okay. Just add that in there and then continue. once you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy to go down and do the rivets. I call them rivets because that's kind of what they look like, at an easier speed. But it's all based off your comfort once you're comfortable with it. See, even sometimes I end up not liking what I did, so I go back. Just gonna add some additional details right here. Fix this up a bit. And then we'll move on to the next panel. Okay, so once you have that one, again, you're just gonna go to the next side, flux, and continue. I realized that I said this was probably going to be 2 hours, and it's going to probably be close to 3. These are just a general brand of like construction gloves. They're not super heat resistant. They're just good to protect the skin. I'm sure there are much better heat resistant gloves out there that would be of benefit. Okay, next slide. And take this side, just clean that up a little bit. Got 2 more panels, and then we're going to move on to spikes. Now you may have some times where you have a gap in between your panels. You can just run a quick line of solder down those to connect them, and then that has a good place for your balls of solder to lay. I'm just going to redo that one. Very good. Okay. Let's go next quick. One last one. Okay, so once that's done, you have all of the rivets inside. They're good to go. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add the spikes to the side. So those are the fun part. So what you're going to end up doing though is you want to make sure your edges are pretty clear of any excess flux. That can make it a little difficult. What you can do though is bring back your bucket or your bowl that you had, get you a wet paper towel, and go through and just clean off the piece, making sure you get that flux off there. Now you can use dish soap. I've used dish soap before, or hand soap, just to kind of get that off there and make that clear for your edges. You can use something like a paintbrush to help you clear those off. All right, just get that out there. And then a dry paper towel to help you get that off. And the nice part about this is your piece is not very sharp yet, so it's a lot easier to clean. Okay. All right, so we have our piece. It no longer has flux on the inside, or at least majority of the flux is gone. This part is you don't really need the gloves anymore, or at least this part, I don't wear gloves normally. What you're going to do is you're going to turn your cactus upside down. It's a little odd, I know. What we're going to do is we're going to start placing the spikes from the top of it down to the bottom and rotate the cactus as we go, keeping the cactus vertical with the spikes when you place them. So again, placing them from the center, rotating out, keeping the cactus vertical as we do it. So what we're going to do is this time is very important, do not put flux on the sides of your cactus. This is going to cause the spikes that you make, or the little balls that you get to make the spikes, fall off and just hit the table. You don't want that. So you want to make sure that this is pretty clear of flux, or as clear as you can get it. You're going to take your iron, you're going to grab just a little bit, okay? And then you're going to take your cactus, again holding it vertically, kind of. Take your iron and just kind of tap. Whoop. I'm going to try to get a spike to come off of this. I think there's some residue, some flux still on it. You're going to get a little spike. You should see it. It's kind of hard to see with this, so we're going to try to make a bigger one. Maybe. There we go. Bigger spike. And we're going to continue to put these spikes all the way down the piece. Now you can go back and just retouch up the spikes if you get one that's not as big as you want it, or it's not placed where you want it. Just grab a little bit more solder, touch and drag, making sure to keep that piece vertical so that your spikes follow the drag downward. This can be teensy bit tedious. Just have some patience and give yourself some grace when you do it. You guys see the spikes? Okay. Okay. And you're going to do the spikes until you reach kind of the bottom. You don't want to put it all the way at the bottom, because then if you angle it funny, it can sit weird on your piece. So there you go. You have your spikes. Be careful. These are, they're very, very sharp. They're like little saw teeth, okay? You're gonna do this all the way around. So I'm gonna demonstrate it one more time, and then I'm gonna demonstrate the petals and show you a finished product. So again, we're gonna take our soldering iron. We're just gonna get a little dollop on there, and we're going to attach it and drag. See, there's just flux on this one. Drag it down. Maybe. Like I said, it gets difficult when you have the flux on there, which is why it's recommended to wash it with soap and stuff. We're gonna try to get it off. Might have to start from the top here. There we go. Got one spike. it's okay if you can't get spikes really close to the center of your cactus. You're not really going to need them or want them there because that's where you're going to put your petals anyway. And sometimes they can get in the way of your petals, make it a little harder to place those. But the nice thing is once you place your petals, you're going to have your soldering iron on anyway. So you can just get rid of those spikes by holding your soldering iron over those spikes, melting them. This is where the patience comes in. Like I said, they are very sharp, like little saw teeth. So be very, very careful when handling these after you make them, because they can be pokey, like a real cactus. And then you can just go and touch up the spikes as needed. So that's the gist of the spice aspect. The next and final thing that we're going to do is our petals. I'm going to flux and solder these very quickly, and then we'll go to the placement aspect. So I'm going to just set this aside. If I can grab this thing, jeez. I'm going to put my gloves back on, solder these real quick, and then we'll place them. And I'll show you what a finished cactus looks like. So with these petals, you're doing the same steps as you did with your cactus body panels, in that you solder or flux one side, solder them, flux the other side, solder that side, and then solder the edges. That. These ones are a little bit more tricky. I just hold one side, allow it to cool a bit so that I don't burn myself, and then solder the other side and move on. Especially with these little ones. These are where the gloves come in super handy. If you don't have these, you will definitely burn yourself. Okay. I wanted it to flip on its own. Okay, and then you're just going to take the pieces, flip them, fix this side, I got confused. All right, last one. All right, and then you're gonna take them just like the other ones, do the sides, knocking off the excess when you need to, and making sure, very important, that these tips have solder on them. Sometimes it's easy to have them not have solder on them if you're going around these and they're very small. Okay, I think we have 2 more pieces after this one. All right, last piece, little baby one. Perfect. All right, so now we have all of these pieces soldered. What we're going to do is we're going to attach them to our cactus. Like I said, I'm going to finish the spikes after I attach these flowers. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start the one in kind of like a causal space of the cactuses themselves. I'm going to grab just a dollop of solder and I'm going to ensure that it attaches itself to this flat base here. Okay, so just making sure that it's attached. This first piece, definitely that it's attached to all sides of this base nicely. Okay, and then you know that's not going anywhere. You can just move it and it moves the whole piece. Then we're gonna go around with our other larger pieces. So these are the large petals, not the small ones. You're gonna go around with them. They can be a little slippery because they still have some flux on them. So just, if they're so slippery that you can't work with them, definitely wipe them off and then continue. So I'm just gonna ensure that this part right here isn't too built up, that it's a little bit more flat. And then I'm gonna place this piece in here. What I'm gonna do first is connect these two petals together by coming up the seam just a bit, okay? And then I'm gonna take some solder and I'm gonna put it on the base so that it's attached to the base as well. So now we're attached to the petal, that main petal, and we're attached to the base as well. We're gonna go around, I'm gonna continue those same two steps. So where we're going to attach first, if I can get my gloves correctly, attach first to the other petal, okay, just a little bit, and then to the base itself. Petal first, then to the base. All right, last petal. This is where we'll connect the last petal to both petals first, and then a little bit to the base. Okay. Here we're gonna add a dollop into the base center to give us a good flat starting point for our smaller petals as well. Okay. Perfect. So this is what it's gonna look like in the center. Once you do that, then you're gonna grab your little petals. Now, these can be hard to grab, especially with gloved hands. So what you can do is use a pair of needle nose pliers and use them instead. Sometimes I like to do this just to have a little bit more control. So you're going to first attach this little main petal to that base, make sure it's nice and secure, and then we're just going to do that all the way around. So the next one's going to be this little petal. Again, very difficult because they're so small. And just like we were doing with the others, attaching the petals first and then to the base. Perfect. Almost done, guys. I mean, we still have the rest of the spikes, but you get it. Okay. Last petal. I'm actually going to put it like this instead. Okay, and then I'm going to take just a dollop of solder like I did last time and put it in the center and just generally do some soldering around the edges to make them uniform and look nice. Just clean that up a bit. Okay. Just one right in the center there. Perfect. So then the center of the flower is going to look like this. Now that's it. The only thing that we have to do is continue with the spikes. I'm going to do the spikes real quick, and then I'm going to show you how I clean and polish the cactus. So this part you might not be able to see so well, but I'm going to do this quickly so I can show you the polishing part. Okay. 3 more to go. does not want to take these spikes. Let's try this side. There we go. Kind of. Okay. Okay, last panel. Actually, let me do one more spike on this top part. There we go. Okay, last panel. And then the cleaning and the, oh, thanks. Sometimes I get really impatient. Especially when sometimes these little spikies don't want to cooperate, especially during a video that you guys may watch for a tutorial and it's like 3 hours long. Okay, all right, so one last thing. Aw, thank you. I'm glad. Okay, so one last thing that I'm gonna do before I go and clean this and then we wax it is I'm going to just take a little dollop and these still kind of have flux on them just a little bit. Yeah, that's not gonna work. Okay, hold on one second. Let me clean this off a bit. Okay, I'm going to clean these off. Just the tips of these flowers. Okay. And then we may have to do this after I wash it the first time. I'm just gonna get a little dollop and place it on the tips of these flowers. And that's gonna make a little ball that looks like that. So they're not as pointy, the flowers are, they're a little bit rounded. I think that looks a little bit nicer than just the flat tip part. But the thing that you have to be careful with is they can't have flux on them. They have to be pretty cleaned off. And this is just kind of, when it comes to putting these little dots on here, trial and error, whatever, like always, whatever you find out works best for you. Yeah, these just rounds them off a little bit, makes them look not as harsh of a edge. You just want to make sure they're not spiky. Unlike the edges of your cactus, we want those spiky. Okay, so you're done. This is the cactus. Now, when it comes to cleaning and waxing, that is the final step, and that's what we're going to go to next. So hold on 1 second. I'm going to unplug this, take you with me if I can. Try not to break it. I don't want you guys to fall over again. There we go. You're gonna get to see me for the first time in this video. All right, now follow me. I just use a regular sink for this and some soap. So I'll set you up right here. Oh, maybe. Let's see how short this can go without absolutely falling down and being crazy. Maybe we'll just do it from a distance and you can see it from over here. Oh, that's perfect. Okay, so what I do is I take just regular dish soap or hand soap, and I pump it into each panel of the cactus. And then I have a little paintbrush, and you just want to wipe that in there, all of these panels. Get nice and saturated. It's gonna get slippery, so just kind of be careful, especially because you already have those little spikes on there. Okay, so making sure you're washing all of that really good. All sides. Especially in those little rivets that you need, because the flux is gonna hide in there. Get that there. Okay. You're gonna take your water and just rinse it off with your paintbrush as you're going. Again, being very aware of those spikes. And down those spikes too with that paintbrush. This is your opportunity to get that solder off of the panels if it's in there. The water and the paintbrush will help do that too. Once you have the panels of the cactus good and cleaned off, you're going to do the petals of your flower same way. You're going to take your paintbrush and get in those crevices there. Just wiping that off. Good. And doing the underside of those petals as well. So holding that cactus and really cleaning all aspects of the flower. And then you're going to rinse that off. Rinse off the whole piece. All right, and now we're going back. That was it for the washing part. Now it's the drying and the waxing. Very quick, very simple. All right, I'm gonna set you down again without burning myself on my soldering iron. Okay, so I'm going to move this piece of paper. I'm going to get a paper towel and put that down, and then I'm just going to take another one and wipe off the excess water that we had on there. Again, be really, I say it a lot because I've poked and cut myself a lot on these little spikes. Be very careful. It's very easy to forget that they're there and then you stab yourself. Okay, once you've dried it off, I'm super new to stained glass. I've been doing this for about 4 months. It's pretty new to me. I asked a couple of weeks ago in the group what would be good, and some said like spray car wax, some people said pledge. So I just went and got some spray car wax, and we're going with it until I find something different. So I have turtle wax, wax and dry, and I'm just going to spray the panels of this and the flower on the top. And then I'm gonna let it sit for a second, and then I'll wipe it off with a paper towel, or at least, kind of dab. You can use, see, it even tears up the paper towel. Ouch. Need to follow my own advice and watch the spikes. When it comes to the flowers, really getting in there with the paper towel is good. You can also use Q-tips. And don't forget to do the underside of them as well. All right, my friends, that's it. That is your cactus. Start to finish, cutting the glass to the grinding, foiling, soldering, and then finally assembly. This is, like I said, the first in the No Green Thumb, No Problem series that I'll be hosting. Hopefully most of them won't be 3 hours long, but thank you for spending the time, and I hope that you found this helpful. And if you make any work with the step-by-steps that I showed, I would love to see it. I'm not in this for any kind of monetary purpose. I'm more so in with, I love sharing knowledge and tips and tricks of hobbies that I've learned with others so that they can enjoy them as much as I do. So happy making, and remember, it's not random, it's chaos. So happy making, and have a wonderful day.